name is Matthew Souaid, and today I'm going to be talking to you about rock and pop sax. In particular, we're going to be discussing the characteristic traits of the style, namely growling, which is distorting your saxophone sound, scoops and falls, which is varying the pitch of certain notes, and pentatonic scales. Now to do that, we're going to be breaking down Clarence Clemons' sax solo in Born to Run. Before we get started, I'd just like to give one quick thank you to Zoom Entertainment that provided me with the backing track for this. If you like that backing track, there's going to be a link down below for you to click so that you can check out that backing track and others that they have available to you. The first technique I'm going to talk to you about is growling. Now, if you already know how to growl or are interested in a different part of this video, I'm going to put timestamps in the description so that you can skip around to the part you're looking for. Now, to get a proper growl, what we're essentially doing is making two notes come out of our saxophone at the same time. What you're going to need to do is sing or hum into your saxophone while you're playing. I'd like you to take a second and just hum while putting your hand by your nose so that you can feel air coming through your nose, and that will show you that your airstream is available to you while you hum. You should feel some warm air coming out of your nose. Now, let's try and get a solid stream of air while you hum. So put your hand in front of your mouth and try and blow a stream of air while you hum at the same time. This doesn't have to be the same as your saxophone stream of air. We're just working on getting a stream of air out, period. Now you should feel cold air against your hand. Now if you're having trouble with this, that's alright. Try and do each of these two aspects separately and then add each one. Say start by humming and then blow a stream of air, or blow a stream of air and then start humming, and see if that helps you. Now if you were able to get a solid stream of air, let's try and apply our saxophone stream of air to what we just did. The air should feel a little faster on your hand. Now to do this, you're going to really have to focus on your support and your diaphragm, so make sure you're using a lot of support. When you're growling, be sure that the note that you're singing is not the same as the note that you're trying to play. If you're singing the note you're trying to play, you're not going to create that growl sound since we're trying to rub two notes against each other. And if you're slightly out of tune with your note that you're singing, you're going to get a wide waver, and that will give us a bit of a distorted sound, but not the one we're going for. So be sure that you're singing a note that's far enough away from the note you're playing. Now, I'm going to move over to my saxophone, and I'm going to walk you through some ways you can practice this and how the sound should be coming out. Let's start by just getting a solid sound on an A sharp. Now, just take a second and hum into your saxophone to see how that feels. Now try and hold a note followed by singing. Now try the reverse. And now a growl dead on. Now I'd like to tag this growl section of the video by saying do not overuse this technique. Although this is a characteristic trait of rock and pop sax, you want to gauge when the right time to use the technique is. For example, it's most common to use a growl when you're soloing during a song rather than playing in a brass section for a song. You obviously want to gauge what the section is doing with what you're doing, and perhaps it may be appropriate to growl. However, you need to figure that out as you're playing with the section. Deciding when the right moment to growl will come with time as you practice on more gigs and more rehearsals. Alright guys, now we're going to move on to scoops and falls. Now if you already know how to scoop and fall, just like in the growl video I mentioned, I'm going to have timestamps in the description so that you can skip around to whatever you're looking for in this video. So let's get started. A scoop or a fall is essentially a way to alter the pitch of a note either prior to playing the note or after playing the note. So let's talk about prior to playing the note first. What that means is you're trying to play a scoop. So to get a scoop, what we're essentially doing is starting a little lower than the pitch of whatever note it is we're trying to play, and we're sliding into the pitch. Often when we're learning, we're taught that sliding into a pitch isn't a good thing because it shows poor technique and poor embouchure control. However, if it's done intentionally, it can be a really cool effect. So obviously make sure you're able to hit the pitch dead on before doing this. However, once you can hit a pitch dead on, this can be a really cool effect going into a note. So like I said, to get a proper scoop, you're starting below the note and sliding into it. Now, to do that, you're going to play with a slightly looser embouchure than your normal embouchure, and you're going to tighten into your standard embouchure right to center the note. Fair warning, doing this, you may feel the sensation to want to bite to bring the pitch back up. You don't want to be biting to do this. If you're biting, you're not doing this properly. What it should be is all your embouchure muscles pushing back up to your normal firm embouchure. So technically this shouldn't require more force than playing a normal note takes. Now the other part of this is that you're going to use your tongue to help you raise the pitch. You're going to start with your tongue a little lower in your mouth than you usually do on whatever note it is you're playing, and you're going to raise it into the pitch to whatever your normal tongue position is, and that will help you alter the pitch adequately. So when I talk about tongue position, how do we know what the proper tongue position is? If I talk about the sound we're going for a scoop, we're kind of going for a wah. You're wah, sliding into it. If you make that shape with your mouth, you're going to notice that the syllables you're singing constitute basically what your tongue position will be. Let me elaborate. When you start boo, your tongue position is going to be lower than when you end that sound. Boo. Now when you get up there, you're making closer to an E shape with your mouth. And when you do that, your tongue position is higher in your mouth. That is essentially the movement your tongue should be doing. It should be starting low and moving higher. Now, let's talk about falls. So a fall is essentially the opposite of a scoop. This is what we do if we're altering a pitch after playing a note dead on. A fall is pretty much what you might expect. We're making the pitch fall. So after a note, you're going to hit it, bow. Now, to do that, you're essentially doing the opposite of what you just did with your scoop. You're going to start with your normal embouchure and loosen it. Now, you don't want to loosen it too much because then you're going to get a crack. And we don't want a crack. We just want to get that note that we're altering pretty much as low as we possibly can without cracking. Now again, similar to the scoop, we're going to be using our tongue to help us lower the pitch. The kind of sound we're going for with a fall is bow. The sound bow starts with your tongue already lower than with the scoop, so obviously this is just for a point of reference. But when you finish the sound bow, you're ending in an O shape with your mouth. So that means your tongue is very low in the back of your mouth. So you're starting a little higher and lowering into it. Now that we've talked a little about how to do a scoop and a fall, let's move over to my saxophone and I'll show you some ways to practice scooping and falling. Alright, now we're going to get into ways to practice scoops and falls. I'm going to start with scoops. Now, first, let's pick a note that we're going to scoop on. Let's pick an A sharp with the octave key. I feel like that's a pretty good note and it's within the key that we're going to be playing this song in anyway. So, first, hit it dead on. Just like in a growl, let's start by just getting the note solid. So, that's your standard A sharp, in tune, no alterations to your embouchure. Now, try and play with your tongue a little lower and with your embouchure a little looser, and try and slowly slide up to pitch. It's as if your note was out of focus and you're sliding it into focus. Notice how much flatter the pitch was before I slid into it. Now do the same thing, but slide into the note a little faster. Now let's try scooping right into the note a little faster. Once you're able to do all this, try and make as small a scoop as possible so that you really have variance on how you can scoop. There are different levels you can scoop. Sometimes you want a nice long scoop, but in particular for this song, we're going to need a quick scoop, so practice gradually making your scoops a little faster. Now, if we move on to falling, we're essentially doing the opposite. We're going to hit our pitch dead on, and we're going to gradually loosen our embouchure before it cracks. To do that, start by hitting your A sharp dead on, and loosen your embouchure all the way to the point that it literally comes off of the mouthpiece, like so. Doing this will give you the impression of loosening your embouchure and lowering your tongue position. Now do the exact same thing you just did, but loosen your embouchure just to the point before the note cracks. So basically get the note as flat as you can. So you could hear I was on the cusp of cracking right there. That's what you want. Now try and do it a little faster and try not to crack. That was about as low as I could go without cracking. Now try and do a very quick fall. Similar to scoops, there's times where you're going to want to make a really long and elaborate fall, but there's also times you're going to want a quick fall. This song needs a fall that's somewhere in between a long and elaborate fall and a short fall, and there's different levels of falling throughout this song, so you're going to have to gauge that as we're learning. To make sure you're able to do whatever length of fall we need, practice doing it short and practice doing it long. I'm going to move on to pentatonic scales. Now again, if you've already learnt your pentatonic scales, because it is among the first scales you learn on saxophone, I'm going to have a link in the description so you can skip over to the saxophone solo. Now there's two types of pentatonic scales. You have major pentatonic and minor pentatonic. Now we're going to discuss major pentatonic because Born to Run is in the key of F sharp major for tenor saxophone, C sharp major for alto saxophone, and E major concert. Now although I'm not going to talk so much about minor pentatonic scales, I just want to add that minor pentatonics are very closely related to the major pentatonic scale. The minor pentatonic scale follows the same notes as your major pentatonic scale, but starting on a different note. Now, I'll elaborate a little more on this a little later in the video. If we look at our C major scale, just a standard major scale, you're going to have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C at the top. Now to get your major pentatonic scale from your major scale, you're going to remove your F and your B, which will leave you with C, D, E, G, A, and C again at the top. Now, although I'm talking about C major, you can apply this to any of your major scales if you remove the 4th and 7th scale degree. Now, let's move over to my saxophone and I'll show you some efficient ways to practice your F sharp major scale and your F sharp major pentatonic scale. First, let's play our F sharp major scale full range of the horn. Now your major pentatonic scale in the upper octave. And full range of the saxophone. And now try it with the growl. Down to your C sharp. Now I'm just going to revisit minor pentatonic scales for a second. Your minor pentatonic scale is based on the same notes as your major pentatonic scale. The only difference is you're going to start on the note that is the relative minor of your root note for the major pentatonic scale. Now I'm going to take C for example again, just because again we don't have to worry about sharps and flats. Now in C your root note is C. if you go to the relative minor means a minor third below the root. What makes up a minor third is a tone and a half. So you have a semitone between C and B, so that's one semitone. A semitone between B and B flat, it's two semitones or one tone. And another semitone between B flat and A. That's your tone and a half. So your relative minor of C would be A. Now if you start your C major pentatonic on A and play from A to A, you're going to get an A minor pentatonic scale. Now this is important to know because obviously we're not always going to be playing a song in a major tonality. So knowing the difference between your major and minor pentatonics and how to go about figuring out which one to use is a useful tool to have. Now, let's get to the fun part, actually learning the Born to Run solo. Now I'm going to have a separate video where if you're a more advanced musician and may have an interest in learning this solo by ear, you can do that. And I'm basically running through the solo without giving you all of the notes and all of the little intricacies, so you have to figure them out a little more. If that's something you're interested in, I'm going to have a link up top for you to click on right now. And if you're not interested, that's okay. Stay with me here and I'm going to explain to you all the ins and outs of the solo, including all the notes. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to break this down for you phrase by phrase, talking about the notes and talking about the little intricacies such as scooping and when to growl. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to have the notes along the bottom of the screen so that you can follow along. First, I'm going to play each phrase without any inflections, just the notes so that you can hear the notes and practice that, and then gradually add the inflections. So let's get started. So for that first phrase, we're essentially just playing around our C sharp. Starting on our C sharp, playing down to our A sharp, going up to our D sharp, basically just sticking around that C sharp until that fourth part of the phrase where you're playing down from your C sharp to your F sharp. All based on your pentatonic scale. I'm going to play exactly what I just did a little faster now. If you're able to get that first phrase with no inflections, let's now add our scoops. That would be the next step. So you're essentially adding a scoop every time you change notes from your C sharp. So every time you hit your A sharp or your D sharp, you're going to scoop. It's a very light scoop. I exaggerated a little right now, but try and get it as light as possible. And you'll also notice that that fourth part of the phrase where you're starting on your C sharp and running down to your F sharp, I didn't scoop. There is no scoop for that short part of the phrase. Now, if you were able to add all these scoops, try them a little up tempo. If you're able to do that, let's add our growl. First without the scoops, and then with the scoops. Here's without the scoops. A little faster now. Once you can do all three of these parts a tempo, you're ready to throw them all together. Now let's start by doing that a little slower. Once you're able to do that, pick up the tempo a little. If you can do that, and you can do that at tempo, we're ready to move on to our next phrase. Now our next phrase starts very similarly to our previous phrase. I'm going to play it, and then we'll talk about it. So, the first little part of that phrase starts exactly the same as the first part. So you're starting on your C sharp and going down to your A sharp. Now the only difference between the second part of this phrase and the second part of our first phrase is that The second part of this phrase goes up to your D sharp, but you're playing between your D sharp and your C sharp back and forth. Simple enough. Now, the new part of this phrase is we go up to our F sharp, going down to our C sharp and back up to the D sharp. Now, if you don't know how to play your high F sharp, this depends on a few different saxophones. If you have a Yamaha, a Yanagisawa, or some newer Selmers, and I believe also P. Moriarty's, there's a high F sharp key with your palm keys that you can use. Now, I'm opting for that one because I find it gives me the tone and brightness I'm going for. However, if you don't have a high F sharp key, or you're more accustomed to using an alternate fingering, the alternate fingering you use is your front F sharp, which is using your teardrop key here, and your A key with your side B flat here. That's the standard fingering. Now, for me, that fingering's a little flat. So if that's the case for you, you can try adding your first finger in your right hand and lifting your middle finger in your left, or you can also try keeping your middle finger in your left hand. Either should possibly raise the pitch for you. If you're able to get that a little slower, let's try and speed it up. Now, from there, you can try adding your scoops, and this phrase has a fall at the end of the phrase. So listen carefully and then we'll talk about it. Just like the first phrase, I'm scooping on that A sharp. I'm not scooping on my D sharps this time. When you go up to your high F sharp and D sharp are scooped into. Your C sharp is hit dead on, and so is your D sharp. But that last D sharp, you're gonna fall with the pitch. Now this one's a slightly longer fall. It's more, I mentioned different lengths. This one's kind of a medium length fall. So for doing it slowly, it's gonna sound a little long, but when you do this solo up to speed, it's gonna be a little quicker. If you're able to do that, let's add all these inflections up to speed. You're going to notice that your fall is a little quicker than I played it the first time I played through with the scoops and the falls. So just watch the length of it. Same thing with your scoops. These scoops aren't terribly long, but the scoops on your F sharp and D sharp are a little longer and more elaborate than the scoops in your first phrase. Now, if you're able to do that, let's try adding a growl with no scoops or falls. Now you're going to notice I didn't growl on the third part of this phrase. That's because there is no growl in the solo. So be careful. This is a spot where you're going to have to quickly change out of a growl once you've finished those first two parts of this phrase. Once you're able to do that, try it a little more up-tempo. Once you're able to do this, let's add the inflections slowly and then up-tempo once you're able to do it slowly. Now, if you're able to do that, let's try it a little quicker. If you're able to play your first phrase and your second phrase up-tempo, try and combine them now. I'm not going to do that right now. I will do that a little later once I combine all the phrases together. However, I encourage you to practice this way, gradually adding each of the phrases. If we continue, we're essentially starting on our high F sharp and gradually working our way down to our middle D sharp with the octave key. The pattern essentially starts on your high F sharp, working your way down to your C sharp, where we're getting that similar phrase that we've already worked on. Once you hit your A sharp, you're essentially just going down a pentatonic scale with a slightly different pattern in playing your pentatonic scale. You're going down two notes, up a note, down two notes, up a note, and then back down to your D sharp. Once you can do this all a little slowly, try and bring it up to tempo. If you're able to do that without too much of a problem, let's start adding inflections. So for that top F sharp, I'm essentially starting right on it and then dropping and scooping back into it. So it's a little bit of a mix of your fall and your scoop, just kind of playing around there. So try and get that sound when you're practicing this. The ba-wah. When I was telling you to practice the phrase before, I was just tonguing that F sharp where you would have slid back into the pitch. However, the pitch is essentially one held note and the rearticulation is where the scoop comes back in. Now continuing on, I don't use a scoop or a fall until the very last note on that middle D sharp. That's where you're going to fall. Now again, it sounds a little longer right now because we're doing it slow, but once you get up to tempo, it's a slightly quicker fall, more of a da-ba-doo dee down. Now, once you have that scoop up top and the fall on the D sharp, try and bring it up to tempo. From there, you're ready to start adding your growl. This growl is a little trickier because this phrase is a little bit more connected, so there isn't as much time to start growling when you're not growling. So I'm going to play it once without the scoops or falls, and I'm going to explain to you after where you growl and where you don't growl. So you're essentially starting that growl once you get to your A sharp and doing that descending pentatonic line. Once you're able to do that a little slower, play it a little faster, more at tempo. And once you're able to get that switch between the non-growl and growl up to tempo, you're ready to start adding your scoops and your falls. I'm going to play it once slow and once up tempo. Now at tempo. Now we're going to move on to our final phrase. This is basically the big run up all the way to your high F sharp. Now I'm going to play it and I'll explain to you the pattern. You're going to start on your D sharp, you're going to go down one note and then up two notes. Basically getting up to your D sharp. Once you get to your D sharp an octave higher, that's when the pattern changes a bit. Now at the top of that pattern, you're basically just holding that D sharp, going up to your F. So this is the only part of the solo that's not part of your pentatonic scale, but it's part of your major scale. Now the reason this might have been done in the solo is that the note that they're adding that's not from your pentatonic scale is the 7th degree of your major scale, which adds just a touch of tension right before resolving to your root. Now this is super effective, and although I said that pentatonic scales are what's characteristic to the style, it's incredibly common to borrow from other scales even in rock and pop, and quite frankly, any other style you're playing. Since we know that it's the 7th scale degree of our major scale, I've essentially just told you that you're going to be playing your F going into your F sharp, or your E sharp, technically, going into your F sharp. If you're using the palm key F sharp that I talked about a little earlier, you're essentially just going to play your palm key F and add that F sharp key. If you're going to be playing your front F sharp, I'm sure at that point you also already know your front F. However, I will tell you what it is here as well. Your front F is essentially the same as the first F sharp fingering I showed you, just without your B flat key. So it's your teardrop and your middle finger in your left hand. Once you have all those notes and you have that pattern practiced, try and do it up to tempo. So to show you the scoops and falls for this section, I'm going to skip the whole run up because there aren't any scoops and falls there. The last scoops and falls are right before your high F sharp, and on that high F sharp, right before you re-articulate your E sharp, you're going to fall out of it. So you're going to scoop into that first high F sharp and fall out of it. Now, I again exaggerated the fall a little just so you can hear it. However, once you do it up to tempo, that fall is going to be shortened quite a bit. Once you can do that, try it with the pattern going all the way up there, just so you can get the whole phrase together, including all the scoops. Once you're able to do that, this whole last section is all growled, so you just have to add your growl. Let's start by adding it slowly, and then I'll play it once up tempo for you. Once you're able to do all this with all the inflections, your growl and everything, you're ready to throw all these phrases together and play the solo. As I said for the first two phrases, start gradually adding each section of the solo phrase by phrase. Now I'm going to play it once slowly with all the inflections and the growl, and then I will play it once up tempo with all the inflections and the growl. Now, one last time with all the inflections and the growl. I'd just like to take a second to talk about saxophone and mouthpiece setups. Now, it's not really all that important what your saxophone and mouthpiece setup is. If you want to play this style properly, get that nice bright sound and get a nice growl that fits the style without being overbearing or not enough growl, you have to listen to lots of saxophone players and find people that play in the style that you're looking to play. It will help you get an idea of the sound you're looking for in your ear. A good person to go check out is Clarence Clemons. If you're looking into rock and pop, he is absolutely one of the best saxophone players to look into for the sound. If you're interested in jazz and fusion, check out Michael Brecker. He has a bright sound too, and I'm sure if you hear that in your head, it'll help you get that sound you're going for. Now, for the sake of argument, I will tell you what my saxophone, mouthpiece, and reed setup are, but again, as I just said, it's not all that important. It's more important to listen and practice. My saxophone is a Yamaha Custom Z tenor unlacquered. I use a Jody Jazz DV mouthpiece with a 7-star tip opening, and I use the Dario reeds. My ligature is Rico H, although it's really not all that important as long as your ligature holds your reed to the mouthpiece. I will admit that metal mouthpieces will produce a generally brighter sound. However, I could go into my saxophone case, pull out my hard rubber Autolink mouthpiece with a harder reed, and more than likely still get a bright saxophone sound to play this style if I wanted. Now, the brightness and growl may be dulled because of the properties of the mouthpiece, however, that doesn't mean it's impossible. In fact, I'd like to just quickly point out that the stereotype, quote unquote, is that unlacquered saxes are more likely to play dark. Yet, as you heard in the video, I was getting a generally very bright sound. Now, I was getting that sound because I practiced and because I've worked at getting that sound, both by listening to players and practicing. If you're trying to get a certain sound and you're trying to wonder how to get it, don't think the first thing to do is look for gear. Spend the time, listen to those sax players, practice. Before I go, guys, I just wanted to let you know that I play in a Bruce Springsteen tribute called The Last of the Duke Street Kings. If you like what you heard me playing and you want to check us out, I'm going to link our Facebook and website down in the description below. You can come check us out in shows. We're doing an East Coast tour. Obviously, due to the COVID-19 situation, things are being moved around. So if, when this video comes out, you see upcoming dates, bear in mind that these are subject to change at the moment due to the current global situation. I hope you found this video helpful on learning some of the characteristic traits of rock and pop sax, and I hope that this also helped you learn how to play the Born to Run solo more accurately. If you found this video helpful, subscribe to my channel, throw me a like, and comment down below what other kinds of video you think I could do to help you guys. If it's other tutorials for certain other saxophone techniques, or just seeing me play some different kinds of material, let me know, and I'd love to make some more videos since this is my first one. I'm going to play the solo for you one more time with the music on screen. I hope you enjoy, and thank you for watching.